They didn't hurt you by accident. They knew you would forgive. So they did it again. How many times must you be broken before you realize forgiveness does not mean they are allowed to come back? Are you forgiving because you feel at peace, or because you're afraid of saying no? In this video, we will explore what Stoic philosophy calls wise forgiveness, not weakness disguised as compassion. You spent years healing, then just one message from your ex, and every memory comes rushing back. But this time, you won't return, because you've learned one thing. Peace is not found in an apology, is found in the boundary you dare to set. Not an accident, but a choice. I want you to take a moment, just a few seconds, to think of someone who once deeply wounded you. Someone you opened your heart to. Someone you loved, trusted, and stood by. And then, one day, or perhaps through many days, they turned their back. They stabbed you with the very things you once gave them. Your trust, your kindness, your patience. Have you ever felt that way? I've sat with many people, especially those over 50, listening to the wounds they've carried for decades. Not physical wounds, but the wounds of the heart, of betrayal, of being used and discarded. And there's one sentence they often whisper through tears and regret. I don't think they meant to. Maybe they just didn't understand me. But today, I want you to hear this from a philosopher, a therapist, and an old friend of yours. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. They didn't hurt you unintentionally. They chose to. Not always in a moment of rage, but gradually, each time they saw you endure. And they thought, I can push further. They saw your kindness as weakness. They tested your boundaries. And every time you stayed silent, every time you forgave too quickly, they learned a dangerous lesson. I can do this again, and they will still stay. I remember an old patient of mine, a woman in her 60s, who came to me with tired eyes. She had endured a husband for 30 years, man who constantly drained her, stripping away her self-worth with toxic words. And yet, she stayed, because he didn't mean it, because he was just stressed. But do you know what hurt the most? When she confessed that he never treated colleagues this way. Not neighbors, not anyone else, only her. That wasn't an accident. That was calculation. Now imagine this. You open your home. You let someone in because you believe they're good. You cook for them, share your stories, laugh with them, cry with them. And then one day, they take something precious from you and throw it to the ground. You're shocked, you're hurt, and they look at you not with remorse, but with cold indifference, or worse, with apathy. Then they say, I didn't mean it, and you believe them. The second time, they do it again. The third time, they laugh while you cry. How many times before you finally call it what it is intentional? I don't share this to make you bitter. I share this to make you clear. In Stoic philosophy, which I have lived by for more than half my life, there is a core principle. The distinction between what we control and what we do not control. You cannot control the actions of others, but you can control how long you allow them to remain in your life. Forgiveness isn't about opening the door again. It's about releasing the weight. It's about breathing freely, sleeping peacefully without needing an apology that may never come. I'm not here to tell you, don't love again. I'm saying, love with your whole heart, but guard it with your wisdom. There's something I often say to my patients. Kindness doesn't need to prove itself by enduring abuse. Because if someone saw your vulnerability and still chose to hurt you, then next time they'll choose it again if you let them. I've seen far too many people carry this one silent regret their entire lives. I wish I had walked away sooner, and I don't want you to be one of them. You don't need to be angry to leave. You don't need a dramatic ending. All you need is clarity. Just one quiet, unwavering decision that says, I deserve peace, not an apology. And if you're listening to this right now, and something deep inside you feels seen, then hear me when I say this. You are not wrong for feeling hurt. You are not weak for wanting to protect yourself. And you are not cruel for saying, enough. This is no longer their story. This is your chapter now. And the first sentence begins with, I choose myself. Segment 2, forgiveness. Doesn't mean re-entry. Have you ever asked yourself this question? If I forgive them, does that mean I have to let them back into my life? It's a sharp question. It stings in the chest, especially when the person you're forgiving is someone you once loved more than anything. I want you to sit with me here. Take a deep breath and just listen. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to open the door again. I've worked with so many people, from seasoned entrepreneurs to retired mothers, even war veterans, and they all arrived at the same crossroads. They believed that to be the bigger person, they had to welcome back those who once shattered them. They confused forgiveness with reconciliation. But let me say this, not as a therapist, not as a philosopher, but as someone who's also lived through heartache. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself, not a ticket someone else can use to walk back into your life. I remember one man who shared this in a group therapy session. His younger brother had stolen everything their parents had left behind. It forced him to sell his home. He spent years living in quiet loneliness. But one cold winter night, his brother showed up shivering, broke, eyes filled with regret, and he forgave him, but he didn't let him in. I asked him, did that feel cruel? He looked at me, calm and clear, and said, no, I'm just protecting what little I have left. That, right there, is a powerful lesson I hope you carry with you. You can forgive someone without letting them return. You can say, I'm no longer angry. I don't hate you. But I also won't invite you back into the space you once broke. Forgiveness isn't an outstretched hand. It's a quiet nod to yourself that says, I choose peace. I release the pain, but I don't forget the lesson. And if you're someone with a soft heart, someone who forgives easily, I want you to hear this clearly. Love does not mean lowering your standards. Not everyone who says sorry is safe. Not everyone who regrets is ready. And not everyone who cries has changed. So forgive, but do it with wisdom. Let go, but with boundaries. And love, but not at the expense of your self-worth. Because peace is not about pretending nothing happened. It's about protecting the person you've worked so hard to become. Kindness does not mean abandoning all boundaries. You have the right to forgive without reconciling. And that doesn't make you cold. It makes you awake. The Stoicist, Marcus Aurelius, once wrote, no one can hurt you repeatedly unless you allow it. I believe you are a kind person. I believe you once loved with your whole heart. But now, I hope you also love with your mind. Because if someone has truly changed, they'll see your boundaries as a sign of growth, not a punishment. And if they haven't changed, then that door deserves to stay closed. You can say this gently, but firmly. I forgive you, but I will not bring you back into a space I spent so long healing from. And if someone asks, if you really forgave them, why don't you let them back in? You can smile and say, because I forgive with my heart, but I protect myself with my wisdom. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll talk about what makes someone worthy of a second chance, and why, sometimes, closing a door is exactly how you open a new one inside your soul. Segment. It wasn't accidental. It was calculated. What I'm about to say might hurt a little. But sometimes, healing starts when we stop covering the wound with illusions, and instead, look directly at the truth. And the truth is this: they didn't hurt you by accident. They watched you and they calculated. I've worked with hundreds of people, from women who lost faith in love, to men who no longer trust after a broken marriage. And across all those stories, there's one heartbreaking pattern. The person who caused the pain knew exactly what kind of person you are. They knew you were patient. They knew you were forgiving. They knew you'd stay. And they used it. I remember a woman crying in my office one afternoon. She said, "I don't understand. He never yells at anyone else. But with me he screams, insults me, looks at me like I'm nothing." I asked her gently, "Does he talk to his boss like that?" She shook her head. "To his friends." Another shake. "Then why does he do it to you?" She looked at me for a long moment, then broke down in tears. You see, toxic people are not out of control. They are intentional. They choose the time and a person carefully. They don't act this way with just anyone. They act this way toward the one person they know won't leave. And that's what cuts the deepest, doesn't it? You were punished for your kindness. You gave patience. They took advantage. You gave grace. They used it as permission. But hear me now, that was not your fault. That was their choice. And your greatest strength now is to recognize that and choose differently for yourself. Stoic philosophy teaches a powerful truth. No one can control you unless you give them the keys to your emotions. But here's the thing. You didn't just hand them the key. You opened the entire door. And they didn't just walk in. They rearranged the furniture. They disturbed everything. They put their name on your soul. And then they shattered it all. I know you wanted to believe it wasn't intentional. Because if you tell yourself they didn't mean to, it's easier to forgive. If you believe they just didn't know better, then your love doesn't feel like it was wasted. But sometimes, that belief is the very thing keeping you stuck in pain. I'm not saying this to make you angry. I'm saying this to help you wake up. You have the right to ask, why do they know how to treat others with respect, but they hurt me over and over? And the answer is simple, because there were no consequences when they did it to you. I once spoke with a middle-aged man. He kept making excuses for an ex-girlfriend who had cheated on him 4 times. And I told him, she's not confused. She just knows you'll forgive her. You can't teach someone with unlimited forgiveness. All you're teaching them is, you can keep hurting me, and I'll still stay. Hearing this might feel like a loss, but I want you to know, awakening isn't the death of love. It's the birth of self-respect. You can say to the person who hurt you, I don't hate you, but I see clearly now, and this time, I choose me. No yelling, no drama, just clarity. When someone calculates how to hurt you, then forgiveness is for you, but letting them back in, that's not a duty. That's a risk. Please remember this. A good person will never make you question your worth. They won't make you feel small. They won't use love as a weapon. And they definitely won't keep hurting you and calling it an accident. And if you're hearing this now, if you see yourself in these words, know that you're not alone, you're not weak, and you have the right to wake up, not to retaliate, but to be free. Segment for spiritual discipline over emotional impulse. You No. In our emotional lives, there are moments when the heart beats so loud the mind can't hear a thing. Have you ever been in a situation like that? Someone hurts you deeply, and your first instinct is to do something, anything to explain, to send a message, to beg, to retaliate, or even to go back. I understand that feeling. I've lived through it. That rush of emotional urgency, it can take over everything. But when left unchecked, those quick reactions can push us to the edge, into choices. We spend years trying to undo. Stoicism teaches us this. You don't have to act on every feeling that rises. You can feel it without feeding it. Because discipline of the spirit, holding steady when emotions pull you off center, isn't about suppression, it's about clarity. In Stoic philosophies, which I've studied and lived for over 3 decades, there's a foundational principle I hold dear. Emotions are data, not commands. They can tell you something is wrong, but they don't get to decide what you do. I once worked with a 62-year-old man. His wife had just left him for someone else. He told me, I wanted to call her right then. I wanted to scream. I wanted to expose her, demand everything back. But instead of acting on that impulse, he sat down and wrote a letter to himself. He didn't send it, he just wrote, and then he let it sit. For 3 days. On the 3rd day, he read it again, and he cried. Not because of her, but because he realized, had he followed that emotion, he would have lost the last piece of dignity he had left. That is emotional discipline. You see, modern culture loves to glamorize. Living your truth, speaking your mind, just say what you feel. But honesty does not mean recklessness. Authenticity doesn't mean impulsiveness. The Stoic isn't driven by anger or nostalgia or loneliness. The Stoic steps back, observes, asks questions like, will this bring me peace? Am I doing this because it serves me, more because I'm overwhelmed by feeling? If I wait 48 hours, will I still choose the same thing? You can feel without reacting. You can hurt and still remain calm. You can love someone deeply and still walk away. That's what your truth demands. Emotions are waves. Discipline is the shore. Without the shore, waves destroy everything in their path. But without the waves, the shore becomes dry and lifeless. When both exist together, you get an ocean. And an ocean has the power to sustain worlds. I want you to think back to the last time you made a major decision while angry, heartbroken, or panicked. Did you regret it? Most of our worst decisions come from an emotionally hijacked state. And this is how the Stoic trains. They delay the reaction. They choose to respond, not to reflexively react. They don't suppress emotion, they simply don't let it take the wheel. I'm not asking you to become cold or detached. I'm asking you to become anchored, the kind of person who can say, I can feel everything, but I only act when my mind is clear. So, if you're in the middle of a storm right now, don't make any big decisions today. Sit down, write it out, wait 48 hours, and when your heart has quieted, ask yourself, what's good for me 10 years from now, not just 10 minutes from now. That is the power of spiritual discipline. Not suppression, not denial, but standing still while the storm rages around you. Segment. You don't need closure from the one who hurt you. I have a question for you. One I believe many of us have asked ourselves in the silence of midnight when the world goes quiet. But the pain speaks loud. Why did they do that to me? Have you ever laid awake, replaying conversations over and over, searching for that one thing you didn't get to say, that apology you never heard, that explanation you thought might finally bring you peace. That's what we call closure, clean ending. We often believe that if the person came back and said, "I was wrong, I shouldn't have hurt you," then somehow we could forgive more easily. We could move on more fully. But let me tell you something. True closure doesn't come from them. It comes from you. I once worked with a 58-year-old woman. Her husband of 25 years left her. No warning, just a cold 2-paragraph letter. No explanation, no goodbye. She waited the first year. She hoped he'd come back with an answer. The second year, she wrote him letters but never sent them. The third year, she walked into my office and said, "I've realized he's not silent because he doesn't know what to say. He's silent because he doesn't need to say anything. And I don't need to wait anymore." And that was the day she began to truly heal. You see, some people don't leave because they're confused. They leave because they know that silence will keep you stuck. They withhold closure because they know you crave it, and that craving keeps you bound to them. But listen closely. You don't need anyone to validate your worth. You don't need someone to agree that what happened was wrong. You already know that. Stoic philosophy teaches us nothing external can bring you peace. If your inner world remains in chaos, we can't control who leaves. We can't control who returns. But we can choose how we end the chapter. The abandoned. Closure is not a final conversation. It's an internal decision. It's the moment you say to yourself, "I don't need answers anymore. I need peace." It's when you stop checking your phone, stop scripting imaginary reunions in your mind, and start living the rest of your life with yourself, not with the shadow of someone who walked away. You can even write yourself a simple closure statement today. I don't need an apology. I forgive because I choose peace. I don't need all the answers. I accept what I don't understand. I deserve to move on not because they came back, but because I chose to stop waiting. Hear me, you don't need them to heal. You don't need an ending from the person who left you halfway. You are the closure. You are the one who gets to end that chapter, so you can begin writing something new. And if you're still hurting, that doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you're human. You have a heart, and that heart given time will heal. But only if you stop offering it to someone who's no longer here. I once spoke to a man who had been waiting for his ex-wife to call him for 7 years. And I told him gently, "She doesn't need closure. But you need to walk out of this room and step into the life that's still waiting for you out there." So today, I'm saying the same thing to you. The peace you've been searching for isn't hiding in a message they haven't sent. It's resting in the decision you can make right now. Segment 6. The past is not a passport for re-entry. Have you ever received a message from someone you used to love? A random check-in, a soft "I've been thinking about us." And suddenly, like the first rain after a long drought, everything rushes back. The beautiful memories, afternoons hand in hand, laughter in the kitchen, that look in their eyes that once made you forget all your worries. And just like that, you start thinking, maybe they've changed. Maybe what we had was too special to walk away from. I understand that feeling. I've sat with many people who felt exactly the same, and I've believed it myself. But let me say this, beautiful memories cannot erase a painful reality. The past is not a valid passport into your present, not if they're still carrying the same hurt. With them, I once met a man in his 50s. He had divorced after his wife cheated. 2 years later, she came back, saying, "I've aged. I understand now what we had." And he felt torn, not because he still loved her, but because he missed the best version of who she used to be, not who she really is today. So I asked him, "Do you miss her? Or do you miss the feeling you had when you were with her?" He paused for a long time. Then he sighed and said, "Maybe. I just miss the version of myself that believed everything could last forever." That's what we often get wrong. We measure people by who they once were, not by what they've actually done to us. Stoic philosophy has taught me this. Nothing is more valuable than the present, and nothing is more dangerous than living. In the past, memories can be beautiful, but if we use them to blind ourselves to current pain, they become the most dangerous. Kind of anesthesia. People say things like, "We were together for so long. How can I just throw that away?" But I ask this instead. If the length of time is the reason to continue, then isn't the length of the pain a reason to walk away? You can't measure the value of a relationship by how long it's lasted. Just like you wouldn't keep driving a car just because it ran well in 1995, when now the brakes don't even work. The past is a place to learn, not a place to live. You can honor the memories. You can feel grateful for what you had, without reopening the door to someone who once walked out. You can say, "I remember us fondly, but I don't invite you back into the life I've rebuilt." I know you want to believe that they can become the version of themselves you once fell in love with. But love can't survive on memory alone. It needs presence. It needs responsibility. It needs action. So if they come back, don't just ask, "How happy were we back then?" Ask this instead: who are they now, and who am I today? I once told a patient after she shared that her ex wanted to return after 10 years apart. They didn't come back because they missed you. They came back because you were the last place they felt loved with kindness. And she understood. She said, "I can't be an anchor for someone who never planned to dock." She chose peace, and she never regretted it. Hear me clearly. You are not the gatekeeper of nostalgia. You are the author of the next chapter of your life. And not everyone from the old chapter deserves a place in the next one. If they've truly changed, you'll see it not in sentimental words, but in present-day behavior. And if they haven't, then the most beautiful thing you can do is protect that memory by not ruining it with a wrong return. Segment 7. Don't trade your healing for their momentary emotion. How long did it take you to stand back up after that emotional fall? I'm not talking about a few sad days. I'm talking about the sleepless nights, the mornings you couldn't even bring yourself to get out of bed, the moments when you asked, "Why did they do that to me? What did I do wrong?" You healed, slowly, like someone piecing together a broken mirror, one shard at a time. You sat alone and learned to breathe without their messages. You taught yourself that peace doesn't come when someone returns. It comes when you no longer need them to. So don't trade all of that just because they suddenly say, "I miss you," or "Please give me another chance." I've worked with many people who spent 3, 5, even 10 years reclaiming their smile. And all it took was one simple message: "Hey, how have you been?" Just that, and they were thrown back into the ocean of memories, where old wounds still lived beneath the surface. But here's what they didn't realize. Just because someone needs you doesn't mean you should go back. Healing is a personal journey. No one gets to interrupt it, not even the one who once loved you. They weren't there when you learned how to stand alone. They didn't hear the cries you buried in your pillow. They didn't witness the quiet strength it took to overcome every craving for one more message, one more call, one more touch that no longer belonged to you. And then they return with red eyes, with promises, with tears. They say, "I've changed. I can't live without you. You're the only one who's ever understood me." Sound familiar? But my friend, love is not enough to justify repeated harm. It requires responsibility. It requires action. It requires time to prove itself. Don't tear down what you've spent years rebuilding just to ease someone else's guilt. You were not born to be someone's painkiller every time they feel lonely. Stoic philosophy reminds us, strength isn't the absence of feeling. Strength is knowing what's worth feeling for. Not everyone who apologizes deserves forgiveness without condition. Not everyone who comes back deserves a seat at your table again. I once spoke to a woman in her early 60s. She had spent over 7 years rebuilding her self-worth after a devastating betrayal. I asked her, if he came back today, what would you give him? She paused for a long while, then gave a bittersweet smile. If I give myself away again, I'll lose myself again. And she chose not to go back. Today, she's a calm, radiant woman, full of light, and no longer waiting on anyone to feel whole. Let me say this clearly. You are not cruel for saying no. You are protecting the person who once suffered, the person who finally learned how to smile again. They may need you, but you need you more. And if someone truly values you, they'll understand this truth. Love is not a waiting room, a place to leave and come back whenever you please. You've come too far to circle back to the starting point just because someone suddenly realized your worth after they once dismissed it. Segment 8. Forgiveness without boundaries is a form of self-harm. Have you ever heard this? If you've truly forgiven, you should open your heart again. You can't forgive and still be this cold. I hear those words every week, from friends, from strangers, from people torn between the need to forgive and the instinct to protect themselves. So let me tell you this, from the depths of my heart, and from decades of working with people carrying deep wounds. Forgiveness without boundaries is not kindness. It is self-destruction. Forgiveness is a gift, but it should never become a free pass for someone to keep hurting you. I once worked with a woman in her early 50s. She forgave her husband for cheating, not once, but 4 times. Each time he apologized. She said, "I choose to forgive because I don't want my heart to carry resentment." But in the 5th year, he betrayed her again. And for the first time, she looked at me with eyes both exhausted and crystal clear. I've realized I'm not forgiving anymore. I'm destroying myself in the name of compassion. You see, when forgiveness lacks boundaries, it becomes a bridge, one the other person can keep walking across, only to burn your trust again and again. Stoic philosophy taught me something that never goes out of style. Kindness without boundaries is not a virtue. It's unwise vulnerability. You can forgive and still say no. You can let go of resentment without reopening the door. You can smile without turning back. Forgiveness is internal. Boundaries are external. And both must walk together if healing is to be done right. There's an image I often use with my patients. Imagine you're healing a wound. You clean it, you bandage it, you give it time to mend. Then one day, you invite back the very person who once held the knife with no signs that they've changed. Are you really healing, or just prolonging the injury? Don't let anyone convince you that Forgiving with boundaries is petty. On the contrary, it's the highest form of emotional intelligence. You don't have to hold hatred in your heart, but you are under no obligation to hold them in your life. If they've truly changed, they will respect the lines you've drawn. If they haven't, then you'll know you were right to build that fence. I know. Maybe you've been told you're too hard, too closed off, not forgiving enough, just because you dared to say, "I forgive you." But I won't let you do that to me ever again. Hear me, you are not wrong, you are evolving. Forgiveness is not a round-trip ticket. It's a peaceful goodbye. A soft no that opens the door to a life no longer haunted by those who once shattered you. If you're listening right now, and you're someone with a forgiving heart, I'm not telling you to change it. I'm just asking you to build a gate around it, not to keep love out, but to filter who's worthy of it. Segment 9. They use your compassion as a form of control. There's a form of manipulation that's far more subtle than shouting or insults. It doesn't come with bruises, it comes with tears, with whispered lines like, "I can't live without you." And the sad truth, many people stay in toxic relationships not because they still love the other person, but because they feel guilty for leaving. Have you ever felt that? You forgave them not because they deserved it, but because you were afraid they'd fall apart if you walked away. You stayed not because you were happy, but because you felt responsible for their emotions. I once worked with a man in his late 50s. His wife, someone he had forgiven multiple times for betrayal, would always cry, saying, "You're my whole world. If you leave me, I won't survive." And he, a kind man, a man who loved deeply, stayed for 12 more years, even as his own heart was slowly breaking. One day, in tears, he told me, "I've realized I don't love her anymore. I'm just trying to save someone who doesn't want to save herself, and I'm sacrificing what's left of my own life to do it." That is not love. That's emotional control disguised as compassion. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach us to be cold. It teaches us to be clear. Kindness should never be used as a rope to tie you down. When someone refuses to change their behavior but uses guilt to make you feel bad for walking away, they don't want you. They want control over your emotions. Hear me clearly. You are not responsible for saving someone if the cost is losing yourself. You were not born to be an unpaid therapist for someone who repeatedly hurt you. You are not obligated to carry their childhood wounds, their emotional baggage, or their patterns of self-destruction, especially when you're the one paying the price. Once said to a woman who lived in a relationship filled with tears, "You are not someone's shelter in the middle of their emotional storm. You are a human being, not a lifeboat for someone who refuses to learn how to swim." And if you're in a similar situation right now, being kept by guilt, by threats, by tears, please hear this. Your compassion is precious. But if it's not paired with wisdom, it becomes the most vulnerable part of you to be exploited. You're allowed to say, "I care about you, but I care about myself, too. I understand your pain, but I can't keep hurting myself to heal. You, I wish you peace, but from a distance." The Stoics call this emotional responsibility. It means you don't take on the role of the savior if that role requires sacrificing your own well-being. Segment 10. You're not cold. You've grown. Just because you don't open your heart again doesn't make you heartless. It means you've learned to love yourself first. Have you ever been told, "You've become too hard. You used to be softer, more forgiving. You've changed"? And when you hear that, do you ever feel guilty? If so, let me say something today that perhaps no one has said to you clearly enough. You are not cold. You are not cruel. You are not numb. You have simply grown. I once sat with a woman in her mid-50s. She was being judged by her own family for cutting ties with a brother who repeatedly borrowed money and disappeared. She said, "I'm not angry anymore, but I've also stopped opening the door. And because of that, I'm seen as too harsh." I looked at her and smiled. "You're not harsh. You're protecting something that took you years to reclaim your peace." Growth doesn't always look gentle. Sometimes it looks like a quiet no. Sometimes it looks like walking away even when others don't understand. You don't need to explain your boundaries to those who once stepped over them. You don't need to justify your emotional maturity to those still stuck in emotional chaos. The truth is, you're not hard, you're not bitter. You're just clear about what you deserve. And that clarity, that's not coldness. That's self-love evolving into wisdom. Growing up doesn't mean you've lost your heart. It means you've learned where it belongs and who's truly worthy of it. People won't always understand why you stopped replying, why you didn't open the door again, why you chose not to welcome them back into your life. But here's the truth. They don't need to understand. You don't owe anyone an explanation for the version of yourself that's chosen peace. You, Dan T, have to justify your evolution to those still trying to drag you back into who you used to be. There's a delicate principle in Stoic philosophy. When your inner world transforms, the old world around you no longer fits, and it will resist the quiet you've finally found. I know you once loved freely. You once gave without boundaries. You once waited for someone to understand you, even without words. But eventually, you learned that love without limits is the fastest way to lose yourself. Now, you're intentional. You keep your gentleness, but place it behind gates of self-respect. You still love, but never at the cost of your identity. And yes, some people will now call you distant, hard to reach, guarded. But that's only because they once knew the version of you who didn't yet know how to protect yourself. You don't need to apologize for growing. You don't need to soften again just to make others comfortable. You don't need to explain your boundaries to those who used to step all over them. Hear me. Peace is the reward of clarity. Awakening is the prize for those who've been hurt and who've learned not to bleed the same way again. If someone says, "You've changed," smile and say, "I didn't change. I evolved. I didn't close off. I just opened in the right direction. I'm not cold. I just learned to love myself first." Segment 11. Forgiveness is yours to give, but access is theirs to earn. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself to release anger, resentment, and the ache that's lingered too long in your soul. But here's what often happens. You say, "I've forgiven them." And someone asks, "Then why won't you go back? Why are you still keeping your distance? Why haven't you replied?" That's when you must gently but firmly say, "Because forgiveness is mine to give, but access to me is not a right. It's a privilege, and one they must earn." I once worked with a man, nearly 60 years old. His ex-wife had betrayed him during a crisis in their marriage. He spent months sleepless torn between love and heartbreak. Years later, she came back and apologized genuinely, and he forgave her, but he didn't let her back in. I asked him, why? He answered quietly, "Forgiveness helps me sleep at night. But letting her back in, that's different. I can't put myself in harm's way again. Not unless I've seen real change. And he was right. He is one of the most peaceful men I've ever met. Stoic philosophy teaches us this. Forgiveness lightens the heart, but boundaries keep that heart from breaking again. You don't have to prove your compassion by letting someone who once shattered you return. Forgiveness doesn't mean restarting. Forgiveness doesn't mean repeating. Forgiveness is an inner journey. Reconnection is a proven process. If someone wants to come back into your life, they need to answer these questions with their actions. Do they truly understand the consequences of what they did? Are they behaving differently now? Are they taking responsibility, not just with words, but with consistent change? You are not obligated to open the door just because you've chosen to release the pain. Forgiveness is freedom, not an invitation. I once told a woman in her mid-50s whose ex-husband returned after 8 years with a gift and a belated apology. If he wants back in, let him wait at the door for a while. Watch closely. Is he knocking because he's truly remorseful, or just because every other door has closed? There is a difference between regret and remorse. Regret is about what they've lost. Remorse is about the harm they've caused. Only when someone moves from wanting to return to becoming someone worthy of return, should you even consider reopening that door. Listen to me now. You are not heartless for having conditions. You are healing. You have the right to forgive and still keep your distance. You have the right to smile and still say no. You have the right to love others, but love yourself first. If someone is truly worthy of you, they will understand this. Your forgiveness is an opportunity, not a guarantee. Your forgiveness is a chance, not a contract. You've just listened to reflections from a journey of healing, self-respect, and stoic wisdom. If you believe that calm, clarity, and compassion for yourself are the right path forward, then stay with us. Subscribe to Life Through Stoicism, a space not just for advice, but for deep emotional clarity for the maturing heart. Let's build a life that doesn't revolve around someone else's regret, but one that rises from your own awakening.